In the previous project, you wrote program code to assign a value to a string variable. In this lesson, you'll ask the user to enter a value for the string variable when the program is running. Programs get so much more interesting when they get input from the user. This lesson will initially use DIY Windows input method to get input from a window, but I'll also show you how to use Java Scanner to get input from the Java console. Hi, I'm Annette Gotland. I'm the author of the Do-It-Yourself Java Games books. I teach Java programming through creating games. Welcome to the video version of my books. We're currently in the Text Games video series, TG, the first of 4 types of game series. The focus of this series is to cover the fundamentals of Java programming. No previous programming experience is required. You'll learn how, when, and why Java programs are written the way they are. This series has 16 projects. We're currently working on the 4th project, TG4, Silly Story. In this project, we'll create a silly story like the story shown in this screenshot. This is lesson TG4.1, where you'll learn to get input from the user. Before doing this lesson, be sure to download gamesresources.zip from www.gotlandsoftware.com, DIY Java Games. Extract the files into your Eclipse workspace folder as instructed in the setup video. The zip file contains the DIY window class used in the Text Games videos. In this lesson, we'll create a silly story based on input from the user. That input will be assigned to a string variable to generate a different story every time the program is run. Note, first we'll use DIY Windows print and input commands to print and to get input from a window. Next, we'll replace those commands with Java console print and input commands in case you want to know how to create these games using core Java instead of DIY Window. Exercise 1. Create the Silly Story project, package, and class. Pause the video if you need more time in any of these exercises. If you want to see how I would complete any of the listings, please refer to the completed listings at the end of this video. First, create a new Java project named Silly Story and add the external jar file DIY Java jar to the library's class path of the project. Next, create a new package with a unique name. Hint, I named mine Annette.Gotland.SillyStory. Then create a new class named Silly Story with superclass DIY Window and with a stub for main and its constructors. And finally, add code to main to call the Silly Story constructor. Run it. What happened? It should have opened the DIY window with no contents. Exercise 2. Print the Mary Had a Little Lamb nursery rhyme. Print the Mary Had a Little Lamb nursery rhyme. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Run it. What happened? It should have printed the nursery rhyme. Exercise 3. Change who has the lamb. Replace Mary's name everywhere with your name using a variable. Run it. What happened? It should have printed the nursery rhyme using your name instead of Mary's, and should have the appropriate spacing surrounding your name. Exercise 4. Let the user enter a name. Enter code exactly as shown so the user can enter a name. Run it. What happened? It should have shown the window with no contents. Did the program not work? Why did it simply print an empty window? Actually, it is running fine. If you look very carefully, you'll see a cursor in the upper left corner of the window. It's waiting for you to enter input. So type a name and press enter. What happened? It should have printed the new name in 2 places in the story. Next, we'll make the program easier to use by telling the user that the program is waiting for them to enter something. Exercise 5. Add an input prompt. Tell the user to enter a name before the program waits for input. Print a blank line before the code prints a story. Run it. What happened? It should have asked you to enter a name. After you entered a name, it should have printed a blank line before it printed the silly story with the name you entered. Because this program is getting longer, there will be more lines of code in the constructor than will fit on a screen in this video. So I'll divide the constructor into 2 sections and label each section with a comment. Exercise 6. Label sections of code. Add comments exactly as shown to label sections for input and the story. Run it. What happened? It should have printed exactly the same as it did before. The lines beginning with // indicate anything following the slashes is a comment. Programmers use comments only for their own purposes. In this case, I used comments to easily identify where I want the code for all the input requests and where I want the code to print the story. Comments have no effect on how the program runs. Exercise 7. Replace more parts of the story. In the input section, print the following pairs of input requests and string declarations that get the value from the input. Enter an animal for animal. Enter a part of the animal for animal part. Enter a color for color. Enter something joined with color for thing. Enter an action for action. Note, this is the second listing of exercise 7. In the story section, replace lamb with animal, fleece with animal part, white with color, snow with thing, and go with action. Run it. What happened? It should have printed the silly story using all the text you entered for each string variable, and there should be appropriate spacing throughout the silly story. Exercise 8. Export the program if you want to run it outside of Eclipse. Remember, right-click on the Silly Story project in the Package Explorer to choose Export. Select Runnable Jar File. Select Silly Story for the launch configuration. Enter sillystory.jar for the export destination. Select the option to package required libraries into the generated jar. Click Finish to complete the export. Double-click the generated sillystory.jar file to run it outside of Eclipse. Refer to video TG4.1 ASCII Art Export a Program for a demo on how to export and run the program outside of Eclipse. You now have a fully functioning Silly Story program. But what if you don't want to use DIY window and would prefer to use only Core Java code? DIY window is not part of Core Java. DIY window is a class I created to make it easy for me to teach the fundamentals of Java programming while printing to and getting information from a window. Next, I'll show you how to use Core Java to print to and get input from the Java console. Exercise 9. Use the console for input and output. Change the import statement to import java.util.scanner instead of com.godsoft.diyjava.diyWindow. Change the class definition to no longer extend DIY window. Create a new scanner variable named scanner exactly as shown. Note, this is the second listing of exercise 9. In the input section of the constructor, replace all calls to print to now call system.out.println. Replace all calls to input to now call scanner.nextLine. Note, this is the third listing of exercise 9. In the story section of the constructor, replace all calls to print to now call system.out.println. Run it. What happened? It should not have opened a window. You should have been able to enter all the information you requested, and it should have printed the silly story with the text you entered in the Eclipse output console. You may have noticed that the cursor location is misleading when getting input from the console. Unfortunately, that's how the scanner class works when run from within Eclipse. Fortunately, the cursor placement works better when you run the program outside of Eclipse in the Windows command prompt. We'll export the program so you can run it from a Windows command prompt later, but first let's fix a warning that showed up with the last set of changes. Even though the program ran okay, there was a warning in the error log indicating an issue with the variable named scanner. The warning says, resource leak, scanner is never closed. Let's fix that resource leak. Exercise 10. Fix the resource leak. After it prints the story, close scanner by calling close with nothing in the parentheses. Save the program. The warning should go away. Run the program. What happened? It should have run the same as it did in the previous exercise. Exercise 11. Export the program. Export the program to a runnable jar file. Use sillystoryconsole.jar for the destination file name so it doesn't replace the sillystory.jar file you created earlier. Because this program does not have its own window, you cannot just double-click the Silly Story console jar file. You must run the program from a console. Watch TG4.1 ASCII Art export a program for a demo on how to export a windowless program and run it in a Windows command prompt window. Running the Silly Story console.jar file from the Windows command prompt should handle the cursor placement similarly to when sillystory.jar was run from the DIY window. That's all I had planned for the Silly Story program. It's up to you if you want to keep the Silly Story project as running in the console, or change all the code back to once again run in the DIY window. You may press Ctrl-Z in Eclipse to remove each change you made to the code since you opened Eclipse. Key points and more. Getting input. To create a silly story, replace words in a known story or your own made-up story with text the user enters for those words. To get input from the program's user, first tell the user what to enter, then put the entered data into a string. Use DIY Windows print and input methods to print text and input data. I referred to these print and inputs as methods. Methods will be explained more in the next lessons. DIY window programs are easier to run outside of Eclipse. Just double-click the exported jar file. Or if you don't want to use DIY window, you could use system.out.println and scanner's next line methods. DIY window programs are more awkward to run outside of Eclipse. Run the exported jar file from a console. Watch TG4.1 ASCII Art export a program for a demo on how to export a windowless program and run it in a Windows command prompt window. DIY window is not part of core Java. DIY window is only used in the text games series of videos. You'll create your own windows in the graphical games video series. Key points and more. If code listings are too long to fit on the screen. I'll divide code into sections, often each section in a different screen listing. I'll add labels to each section of code using comments. That way I can easily specify which section of code I'm referring to. The lines beginning with // indicate that anything following the slashes is a comment. Programmers insert comments only for their own purposes. In this lesson, I used comments to easily identify where I want all the code for the input requests and where I want the code to print the story. Comments have no effect on how the program runs. Here are the completed listings for all the exercises in this video. This is the end of the only lesson in the Silly Story project. Your program successfully generates a different silly story based on input from the user. You should now know how to get input from the user, and if you prefer, how to use core Java code instead of DIY window in any of the games created in my text games series. In the next lessons, we'll go back to the name game that was created in TG3. We'll add user input, analyze the input by comparing strings, and print different responses based on the name the user entered.